Welcome to Total Dental Care. Today is our second in our quarterly series of free seminars that we make available to the public. You don't have to be our patient, you can be anybody's patient. We want you to be able to come and get the information that you need to better understand some complicated dental topics. Today's complicated topic that we hope to uncomplicate for you is dental insurance, understanding your dental insurance. So we will jump right in to this topic. The first thing to know about dental insurance is what it is not. It is not anything like medical insurance. Medical insurance, we've sort of been trained to believe covers almost everything, and you just have a set copay that you pay when you go to the doctor's office, right? Or at least that's how it was for many, many years. The Affordable Care Act has changed that somewhat, but generally speaking, health insurance is a comprehensive coverage. It's going to cover most things. And your copay when you go to the doctor's office is the same every time you go, right? Now, obviously, if you're in the hospital and have things like that, of course, it's different. But when you go to the regular doctor for sore throat or hurt foot or whatever, it's the same copay every time. So it's pretty easy to understand. Well, dental insurance also has a copay, but unfortunately, the dental copays change. And they change based on what type of dental treatment you're having done. The insurance companies really use three main categories to organize all the different types of procedures. The first category is called preventive or diagnostic, and that's going to be exams, x-rays, cleanings. It may also be fluoride or sealants, things of that nature. Most plans pay 100% for that. We're starting to see more and more plans that pay less than 100%, some that pay 90 or 80. Can anybody guess why that is? Why they would be changing and going down in coverage? Well, because they want to be able to keep the premiums at or below what they were, right? No insurance company wants to have the bad rap of we raised your premiums, right? But as healthcare costs rise, if they don't raise the premium, what do they have to do? Reduce the benefit. So you'll see a lot of times when you're given the option to renew your coverage, sometimes they'll say, you know, in order to have 100% coverage for your cleanings and exams, you can pay this premium, or you can pay less per month. Always beware if you can pay less per month. There's always a catch, and one of the catches is sometimes they've reduced the amount that they're going to pay for your cleanings and exams. So I would say probably still 70–80% of plans pay 100%, but there are some that are less. So just kind of be aware and know the details of your contract. Before I forget, I want to introduce someone to you, and that is Glenda Meadow. Glenda is our treatment coordinator, and she would be the person to help you with any specific insurance questions, financing plans, and things of that nature. So Glenda is a face that you will learn to know and love. So. The second category that the insurance companies use is called basic or restorative services. And that's going to be things like fillings, extractions, root canals, treatment of gum disease. Most plans pay that at around 80%. Again, there are some that in order to keep those premiums what you're used to, they're reducing the amount they cover in that category. So some are covering only 70, 60, or even 50%. Okay. And then the third category is major. And that would be things you would probably call major, like having a crown or a bridge, a denture, a partial. Most plans pay 50%. That's pretty standard. But again, as a cost-saving measure, a lot of plans are reducing what they pay for major services to 40, 30, or even 0%. So,
I got a question.
Yeah.
Which category would, if someone had implants with posts and all that?
Mm-hmm. Implants are often a category on their own. They don't typically put it into any of these. They'll have a separate line item in your contract for implants.
How about for maintenance?
Maintenance of?
Implants and so forth. That's usually a fairly high expense.
Right. It just depends on what codes are being used. Some of the repairs or maintenance of implants might be considered under the restorative category, that basic, and some may be in the implant category. So you would just need to check your specific plan. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. So what determines the level of coverage that you have? I mean, who makes up that rule? It's not the dentist, I promise you. It's the contract that you have with the insurance company. And what a lot of people, I think, don't understand is that every insurance company has literally hundreds of different contracts or different plans. If an employer goes to Blue Cross and Blue Shield and says, we would like to provide dental coverage for our employees, they're going to say, great, how much do you want to spend per month? And the employer will tell them, well, we'd like to spend around this per employee. So Blue Cross Blue Shield will come up with a plan and say, well, here's what we can offer you for that price. Okay? So at some point in time, you may not have been aware of it because maybe your human resources department or someone else, made that decision for you. But at some point in time, there was a discussion between the employer and the insurance company of what benefits, do we want to provide? What do we want to pay for? And if you are going out into the market and getting an individual insurance plan, there's a lot of those available these days. That's something that you can negotiate with the insurance company on. Don't necessarily take the first thing they offer you. There's always something, that costs a little more but gives you great coverage, or maybe costs a little less. So there's a wide range is what I'm trying to communicate of options. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's lots and lots of different plans out there. So ultimately, the benefits that you have depend on the contract that you negotiated or that you accepted with the company, okay? So here are some questions to ask yourself if you're going to go out into the market and get an individual plan for yourself or your family, or if perhaps your employer is offering you coverage. Now, let me back up. If the employer is paying for the coverage, take it. I mean, of course, of course. Take what they're going to give you. But I'm talking about if you have a plan that's offered to you at work, but you're paying for it. It's a payroll deduction item. It's still your money paying for it. Then you want to think about some things before you say yes or no to that plan. One question you'll want to ask yourself is, how much of a deductible am I willing to have? And you guys know what a deductible is, right? It's an amount of money that you've got to pay up front before the insurance company pays anything. Just like with auto insurance or homeowners insurance, the same thing. So commonly we see $25 or $50 per person per year. That's pretty standard. Some plans may be more. You may see $75, $100 per person. But on average, it's usually $25 or $50. You want to ask, okay, how much benefit do I want to have per year? Because that's another sort of distinction of dental insurance as opposed to medical insurance that we're used to. Technically, medical insurance has a limit or a maximum too, but hopefully none of us ever finds out what that is, right? Because it's a very large number. It's, health insurance is intended to be comprehensive and to pay for lots and lots of things, but dental insurance is not that way. Dental insurance is what's called a defined benefit plan, which means that there's a limited amount of resources, a defined or set number of dollars that they're going to pay per person per year. And so if you are a person who has relatively healthy teeth, you come to the dentist twice a year and most of the time you don't need anything. If you do, it's maybe just one filling or one crown. If you're that lucky person, then $1,000 in benefits per year is probably plenty. And you wouldn't necessarily want to buy more than you need because of course the premium would be higher. Right? But know that those are options. You can choose $1,000 in benefits, or you can choose $1,500. There are plans that go up to $2,500. It's just based on how much you want to pay per month for that. A question you'll want to ask, do I want to have 100% coverage for cleanings? Or am I willing to have, 70 or 80% coverage? I know I'm going to have to pay something when I go to the dentist, but I'm okay with that because my monthly premium's lower. Right? So those are all kind of things to think about when you're choosing a plan. Also, you want to think about orthodontic coverage. Do you have kids or teenagers that are going to be needing braces? Some insurance plans actually these days are covering orthodontics for adults, which is really unusual. For years and years and years and years, orthodontic coverage stopped at age 19. And it still does on most plans, but every now and then we'll see one that will pay for braces for adults. So if you are someone who is wanting braces, you might want to think about looking for that. And then implants, as we talked about, it's a separate line item from everything else. So if you know that you're wanting to get some implants, you want to make sure your plan covers those. Okay, so here's what we were talking about a moment ago, kind of the economics of dental insurance. If you've got generally healthy teeth and gums, you get your teeth cleaned twice a year, you don't usually need other dental care, you may not need insurance at all. You may want to be what we call self-insured, and that might be through a health savings account. If your employer offers that, that's a great way to pay for your dentistry. Or we have a program here in our office for patients who do not have insurance, and it's called the Smile Smart plan. There's a brochure on all the tables you can take if you're interested. And it's an alternative to insurance. Okay, it's not used with insurance, but it's an alternative to insurance. And what it is you pay one fee per year. Right now it's $199 for the year, and that includes 2 cleanings, exams, and x-rays, and 15% off of anything else that you might need. So if you needed an implant, or if kid needed braces or whatever, you'd get your 15% off of that. So that's what I mean when I say self-insure. Now, who would that make sense for? Well, many dental insurance plans today cost $30 per person per month. If you've got one that costs less, you're lucky. That's pretty standard, and some of them cost more than that. But just as an example, if you had a plan that paid that cost you $30 a month, that's $360 a year that you're paying to the insurance company. If all you're using that for is 2 cleanings, you've lost money on that deal, right? Because your 2 cleanings don't cost $360. So you've spent more than you really had to. Do you see what I mean? Which is why we came up with this plan, because $199 is right about what your 2 cleanings are, and that way, if you need something else, you get 15% off of it. If you don't need anything else, you haven't paid for a benefit that you don't need. Okay? Because keep in mind that those annual benefits do not roll over to the next year. If you don't use them in the calendar year, they're gone. Okay? So, all right, we've already hit on this a little bit. A few concepts that do apply to all plans, that there will be a deductible of some kind. How much it is depends on the contract that you have chosen, right? But there will be a deductible of some kind. There will be an annual maximum, the amount of which depends on the contract that you chose. But there will be some amount of money that once they've paid that amount, they're done. All plans have exclusions. Exclusions. They're rarely in bold on the title page of the policy, right? They're buried somewhere in page 37, sub A, sub Roman numeral 3, right? But there are always going to be exclusions, and the most common ones are implants, orthodontics, and sometimes major services are just excluded altogether, so crowns, bridges, dentures. Now, why would they be excluded? What do those things have in common? Yep, we have an answer from the audience. Money. Those are higher dollar procedures. So of course an insurance company, if they can avoid paying for the high dollar procedures, then they can keep your monthly premium low, and you feel happy because your monthly premium is low, but you're not really getting everything that you might want or need to get. So just always be aware that there are exclusions, and you want to know what they are before you choose that plan. There are also going to be frequency limitations. Okay. Certain types of procedures, they'll say, well, yeah, we'll cover that, but we're only going to cover it when we want to, essentially. The most common ones are Bitewing X-Rays, which is the little X-rays we take 2 on each side of your mouth, and those are to look for decay between the teeth that you can't see with the naked eye. Most plans pay for those only once a year. The panoramic X-ray, the big X-ray that goes all the way around your mouth, where you stand in the little machine and we say, be really, really still and don't move, and that takes that picture. They'll pay for that every 3 or sometimes 5 years. Okay. Sealants, the little clear coating that we put on the biting surface of the molars and premolars to hopefully prevent you from getting cavities there. They're paid once per tooth every 3 to 5 years. Fluoride application used to be twice a year. That was just standard across the board. Every kid in America was getting fluoride twice a year. They figured out that if they cut that in half and only pay for it once a year, their cost goes way down, right? So we're starting to see a lot more plans that only pay once a year when they used to pay twice. Deep cleaning, that's just kind of our common term for scaling and root planing, which is just a fancy way of saying cleanings for people who have gum disease. It's a more involved process. And most plans will pay for that once every 2 years, or some of them only once per lifetime. Root canal therapy is once per tooth per lifetime. Okay. There are also going to be age limitations, so be aware of that and look out for that before you sign up for a plan. Sealants, most plans pay until 19, some of them only 13. Okay. Fluoride is most commonly up to 19, and orthodontics most commonly up to 19. As I mentioned earlier, there are some plans we're starting to see that will extend the orthodontic coverage to age 26, or sometimes there is no age limitation, but those are rare. So just if that's something that you know that you're going to need, make sure you look for a plan that has that. So people will call us sometimes and say, you know, I've been offered such and such insurance plan at my work. Is that a good deal? Should I take that? Okay. And so this is how I would define good coverage. This is what I would want to pay for, right? A low deductible, a high annual benefit, 100% coverage for preventive, that's your cleanings, exams, x-rays, 80% for your fillings, extractions, root canals, 50% for your crowns, bridges, dentures, partials, and sure, I'd love it if implants and orthodontics were included too. So that's like really great coverage. If you kind of think of that as like the gold standard of dental insurance, then you kind of know a frame of reference for whatever you're looking at. You can kind of compare, you know, if this is like the best that it ever is, you know, then you kind of have a standard frame of reference for that. By the way, you all have a copy of this entire PowerPoint in your folder, so feel free to make your notes or jot that down. So what would more basic coverage look like? Well, this would still be a very acceptable plan, but it just depends on what your needs are as to whether this would be something that would work for you. So, you know, more basic coverage would be something that has a really high deductible, a lower annual benefit, only pays 70% for preventive and only 50% for basic, and doesn't pay for major at all. Okay? So if that's what you're being offered at work, you definitely want to look at how much that's going to cost you per month, because that's really not going to help you a whole lot. Okay. Okay. So let's look at how some of these concepts that we've talked about work together. I'm using a few examples because I think a lot of times that's the easiest way to see the message. If there's a filling that costs $125 and your insurance pays 80% of the filling, but you have a $25 deductible, then that simply means that before they pay anything, it's going to be the $125 minus the $25 deductible to get to $100. So they're going to pay 80% of $100. Okay? So they're going to pay $80, which means you're paying $45. You're paying the $25 deductible and the 20% of this. Okay? Another example, same filling, $125, same coverage, insurance pays 80%. But in this example, you have a $1,000 annual limit, and the insurance has already paid $950. Let's say that earlier in the year you needed a root canal and a crown, and so it's already paid $950. So that would mean normally it would pay 80% of $125, but there's only $50 left on the annual benefit. So they would normally have paid $100, but now they're only going to pay $50 because that's all that's left on the annual benefit. So just understand that those work to get, yes, it's 80% coverage, but the annual limit trumps everything else. It's like the ace or the, you know, trump card. So in that scenario, you would actually be paying $75. There are several myths or common misconceptions about dental insurance, and this is by far the most common one. We probably get this question 2 or 3 times a week. They'll say, someone will call and say, hey, I got a bill for $25 from you, but my employer said that I'm supposed to get 2 free cleanings a year. We hear that all the time. And that's not untrue, but there are factors that affect whether or not they're really free, and one of them is that the deductible very often still applies. In the olden days, the glory years before the Affordable Care Act, things were different. And then the deductible usually did not apply to your cleanings. You kind of got a free pass on the cleanings. The deductible would only apply if you needed something else done. But now, I would say about half the time, do you think, Glenda? Probably about 50% of the time, the deductible does apply. So in that sense, it's not really free because you do have to pay that deductible. Okay. Also, you'll have frequency limitations. So it may be that they did pay for the exam and they did pay for the cleaning itself, but you needed x-rays, and let's say you came in and said, Doc, I got a tooth that's hurting me. Well, it wasn't time to take the x-rays, but because you needed one, you were hurting, we took one to look at that tooth. The insurance says, well, we're not going to pay for that x-ray because we did it 6 months ago. Okay. And then you have, of course, your age limitations. You have once again, the annual maximum, the trump card that trumps everything else. So there's lots of different reasons that the free cleaning may not really be free. Okay. Myth number 2, if my insurance doesn't pay for it, I must not really need it. Well, I think we all know that that is a myth. Like we said in the very beginning, dental insurance is not intended to be comprehensive or universal coverage. That's never been the intention. The intention is that it is a defined benefit plan. You're essentially paying a premium in order to have a set amount of dollars to spend. You know, like in the example we talked about, you're paying $360 a year to get $1,000 in benefit. That's it. It's never intended to pay everything. So always kind of keep in mind, you know, it's really almost like a $1,000 coupon or discount off of whatever, you know. The insurance company is in business to make money, and that's fine. I mean, that's, hey, we know this. That's no secret. But you've always got to remember their job is to keep their costs lower than what they're bringing in premiums, right? I mean, that's how they make money. They have to collect more in premiums than they pay out in claims. So, you know, their primary concern is not your dental health. So we always encourage our patients, don't let the insurance company dictate the level of care that you receive. All right, a few more terms and concepts. Missing tooth clause. This one gets a lot of folks, you know, someone will come in with a tooth that's been missing for several years and they'll say, hey, Dr. Harper, I'd like to get a bridge or an implant to replace that tooth. It's been gone forever and, you know, it didn't used to bother me, but I really would like to replace that tooth. And I was thinking I might go get some insurance so it would help pay for that bridge. Unfortunately, the vast majority of plans have something called a missing tooth clause that says if the tooth was missing before you started this plan, we're not going to pay to replace that tooth. Okay, so just always be aware of that before you run out and sign up. Waiting periods, same thing. You know, you come in with a toothache, doctor says needs a root canal and a crown. Great, I'm going to run out and get me some insurance to help pay for that because I know that's expensive. Well, unfortunately, there's almost always a waiting period. We most commonly see either 6 months or a year. Used to be 6 months was more common. Now almost all of them, if there's a waiting period, which there almost always is, it's about a year. So just always kind of be aware. You probably don't want to have your toothache for a year, you know, before you get that fixed. So just kind of look out for that. Does anyone have two insurance plans? Like maybe you have coverage and your spouse has coverage on you also. Okay. Well, if that ever comes up, be aware. Most insurance companies now have something called a non-duplication of benefits clause, which is just a very wordy way of saying that if the primary insurance paid what the secondary would have paid if they were the primary, then the secondary doesn't pay anything. So, as an example, if something cost $100 and you have 50% coverage on both plans, you'd think, well, the primary ought to pay half and the secondary would pay half and then I wouldn't have to pay anything. And years ago, that was correct. That's exactly how it worked. But as a cost-saving measure, more and more insurance companies are saying, if we're the secondary and the primary pays what we would have paid, then we're not going to pay anything. We're not going to duplicate the benefit. Now, that seems absurd. You're paying a premium to two different companies. What does this one care what this one does? Well, because it's about keeping their bottom line down. So, yes, ma'am.
That depends on the two insurance companies you have together.
Yes, each company has their own policy on that. So, and really, even within the same company, some plans will have that clause and some plans don't. So it's very plan specific or contract specific. You can't say, you know, Delta Dental always does this or Blue Cross always does this. It's very much specific to the individual contract that you have. So I tell you this to say, if you have coverage at your work and your spouse is also given dental coverage by their employer, if it's free to you, that's great, take it, sure, why not? But before you write a check every month to get a second policy, just understand that that clause is in more and more and more and more plans. We see it much more often than not. And so just kind of understand that that secondary may not be a lot of use to you. Now, there is one situation where it would be, and that would be if you needed just a ton of stuff and you needed it all in 1 year, and you used up all of the benefits of the primary, then we could file it to the secondary, and then it could benefit you. So I'm not saying it's never useful, you know, but just kind of understand how that clause works, and you can kind of decide if it makes sense for you. So that's the example that I gave. Okay, predetermination of benefits, otherwise known as a pre-authorization. That's a very common term with medical insurance, right? If you've ever been admitted to the hospital, almost always they've pre-authorized all manner of things before you ever go in because they want to make sure they're going to get paid by the insurance company. Unfortunately, the dental insurance world doesn't work quite like that. They do offer what's called a pre-authorization, but unfortunately, when we send in that paper, they take several weeks to respond, which if it's an elective procedure and you have several weeks to wait, that's fine. But if you are in pain and needing a root canal today, waiting several weeks is not ideal. But even if we do go through the process, send the form, and they reply, they send us a nice little letter that says, you know, yes, Ms. Smith has 50% coverage for crowns, okay, or 80% coverage for root canals. But then at the bottom, in fine print, usually in italics with a little bitty asterisk next to it, it will say, and I quote, "This is not a guarantee of payment. No payment decision will be made until the services are provided and the claim is received." That sounds an awful lot to me like we're not promising to pay anything, you know. So ultimately, even when we do send in that form and we do get that pre-authorization, it's really not an authorization. It's really just restating what's already written in your handbook anyway, that you have 80% coverage for a root canal. It's not a guarantee that they're going to actually pay anything. So I always advise patients, we'll send it in if you want us to. I mean, if it'll make you feel better, we'll certainly do that. But just understand that it's still not a guarantee. Okay. Replacement clause. If you have a crown that is 4 years old and you bite down on a Jolly Rancher and you break that crown in half and you need a new crown, most insurance policies will only replace an existing crown or bridge or other restoration every 5 years. Some of them every 7 years. So even though your plan says you have 50% coverage for crowns, there's always some little fine print that goes along with that. Okay. Note, here in our office we make Bruxer crowns, which have a lifetime guarantee against breakage. So. Okay, here's a very common term, and I think probably one of the most misunderstood things in not just dentistry, but in medical insurance as well. Who's heard the term preferred provider or preferred dentist? Yeah. I used to think that preferred meant that they must be special. You know, they must have gone through some lengthy, qualification process, to be deemed preferred. No, the process is you fill out a form and you sign it and you send it into the insurance company, and that form is really a contract between the dentist or doctor and the insurance company. And it's basically an agreement that they have, and the agreement is the insurance company says, hey, Dr. Harper, if you agree to be a preferred provider for our company, then we're going to send a whole bunch of new patients your way, because we're going to put your name on our website as being a preferred provider. We're going to put it in their booklet, and we're going to make sure everybody in the area knows that you're one of our dentists. And they do that. That's true. And in exchange, the doctor agrees to accept a reduced fee, a fee less than what he would normally charge. So, for example, if we charged $100 for a filling, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, the largest insurer in the area, would say, well, we're going to pay $70. Okay? So if we're in network with Blue Cross, then that means, and I think that's my next slide. Let me jump on over. No, maybe not. There it is. So, if the regular price for something is $100 and the insurance says, well, the most we'll pay is $80, then that leaves a balance of $20. Okay? So if your dentist is in network or in a contract with your insurance company, the dentist writes off that $20. It goes away. Okay? If your dentist is out of network, not in a contract with your insurance company,